Hey there. So I realized I don't actually have any DCC Lankhmar content on the channel, which is weird because DCC Lankhmar is actually like my favorite line that Govan Games puts out, even more than like original DCC. Part of that is because before the pandemic hit, I was running about a year-long or so campaign for my friends, which to this day is still, in my mind, the best campaign I've been a part of, both because of the players and the content. It was just a perfect mix. I ran like one or two scenarios, and then for the rest of like the 6 to 8 months, it was basically all improv going off of the carousing table and just whatever shenanigans the players want to do. Basically, we would just sit down and I would basically go like, okay guys, what do you guys want to do today? And we would just sort of go through that, and they had plans. They would be talking to me during the week, just that perfect thing where everybody's so excited throughout the week to get back to the table and keep playing. It was one of those things. There's a level of bias on my part because of that experience. It strips away a few things I don't like about DCC, which is both clerics and alignment. I can get into that in a different video if people are curious as to why I'm not a fan of either. The alignment one, I think, is pretty common as to why people don't love alignment. It has its own weird things. But the cleric thing is a bit more of a specific me thing, which is weird because clerics were one of the first things I was actually excited about when I was reading through the DCC book. So I can get into that in a different video. It also adds stuff like fleeting luck, which is a mechanic I bring into all DCC games, whether we're doing Lankhmar or not. Fleeting luck is just one of those mechanics that is so well done. You read it and you go, oh, this is perfect for this system. And I recommend anybody who doesn't know what it is to just use it. Basically, to give you the quick and dirty of it, is that if you roll a natural 20, you get a fleeing luck token, which can be used as luck in DCC can be used, but you don't burn away your permanent luck. You also get it from doing cool stuff. So if everybody at the table is like, oh, that was awesome, the GM should give you a fleeing luck, or whatever it might be. The real catch is that if anybody at the table rolls a 1, everybody loses their fleeting luck. So it's a good way to make sure people don't just hoard it, Some people get 2, 3, 4 fleeting luck tokens, and then somebody just rolls a 1, and suddenly it's all gone. So it's a great little mechanic to make sure people are using that risky part of DCC, and also getting something fun out of it for doing cool stuff. It's just such a nice mechanic. But what I love in general is that DCC Lankhmar brings a lot of good urban content that you can use for anything. Like, you can use it for DCC Lankhmar, or you can use it for your own system and your own setting. So if you have your own city, or if you're playing with OSC or Worlds That Number or anything else, you can use these, and it doesn't take much changing. You have to change a few names here and there, or this or that. But overall, they're pretty solid little things by themselves that you can just take for your own games. And that's what makes them great. The 3 I'm covering today all have similar themes of thievery and that sort of thing, which is going to be the case for a lot of DCC Lankhmar scenarios, considering the source material, which follows the stories of 2 thieves, so it all fits thematically with the source material. So if you're running a thief-centric game, or if you're running an urban fantasy game, all 3 of the scenarios are going to be great for that, because they'll just fit right in with whatever world you're doing. You might need to change some names here or there, or maybe a location or whatever else, but in general, this should work perfectly for whatever you need. Of course, this will be a spoiler-filled review for all 3 of these scenarios. I won't be going super in-depth on these. I just really love talking about DCC Lankhmar, and these are 3 scenarios I really enjoyed running and thought you might like to grab them for yourselves. So let's just get into it. So the first scenario we're covering today is Masks of Lankhmar, which is the latest one I've run. This one is so much fun. It's also really fucking mean, but I highly recommend it. So Masks of Lankhmar is a meat, and what a meat is that DCC Lankhmar doesn't have funnels, because the characters are meant to be a little bit more, bigger than life. A bit like Fat the Grey Mouser, they're not meant to be gong farmers who got lucky and are now adventurers. DCC Lankhmar characters have a little bit more survivability, and it's kind of shown here where you start off at level 1. And basically the point of the meet is where all the characters meet for the first time, hence the name. It's sort of meant to reflect a lot of those sort of pulpy stories where you have the characters kind of meet the first time and they sort of go through a harrowing adventure, and that's how they become sort of bonded through the crucible of that, insanely dangerous adventure. And it's just a great way to kick off a campaign, and this one is awesome. I highly recommend using this one as a campaign starter. There is another meet, which we'll cover after, which is No Small Crimes in Lankhmar. This one is really fun. It's very straightforward, and this one will probably be the one we cover, the least amount on, because there's not much to say about it. But this one, I think, has a way better start for a campaign. Like, it goes off with a bang. And basically what it starts with, the characters all sort of come across each other outside of Vault. They were all independently going to rob this place. There's a big party going on with all these, nobles and aristocrats and that sort of thing, and they all got past in their own ways, and they can sort of describe how they did that to sort of, first solidify how their character operates, Did they use magic to get past? Did they use their thieving skills to open up a window and sort of go through? As a warrior, they pretend to be like a mercenary who just sort of went through as a guard or something like that. It's a good moment for them to all sort of try and see how their character operates. So it kicks off with a bang because they're all down in this basement just outside where the vault is supposedly, and they're all kind of just looking at each other. There's a little bit of a Mexican standoff as everybody here is for their own reasons, and they didn't realize other people would be here. But before they can really do anything, a bunch of guards have sort of followed them in and go after them. So it's a well done moment because it kind of makes the characters have to bond together to actually survive against this onslaught, and then once they do that, then they have a chance to, actually chat. And so when I ran this, that's how it worked. They ended up killing the guards pretty handily and together as a group. And then they sort of then talked about working together until they got out of here. So obviously, I ran that for a one-shot. But as a campaign, I think that would have been an amazing start. Everybody has the characters, and we just go right into it. 0 to 100 immediately. Shows you what kind of stuff Lankhmar has in it. And I think that's a great way to start off a campaign. They have the usual few trials of this little heist of just going through a few different rooms, doing a few different problems, until they can get what they're looking for, which is a key. And they'll also deal with the Thieves Guild, who come down, and they'll also deal with having to get out of that house that they went in. So this is a lot of good stuff already, because you have the treasure, you have the Thieves Guild faction part of it, you have the usual dungeon crawling part of having to get through different aspects, and then you have the how do we get ourselves out of the situation aspect, which is just fun. I think players love that sort of thing, because that is, I think, the best kind of RPG puzzle. It's not just a riddle on a wall, which is, fine, or, perhaps some sort of weird trap that's hard to describe and everybody gets frustrated. It's just okay, guys, you're in a house full of guards and people, and you're in the basement, and you just stole from them. How do you get out of here? And so what my players did was, of course, did what all great players do, and they set fucking fire to the goddamn basement. And then had everybody start evacuating, and in the panic, they got out. If you can't tell already, I'm playing with players who are used to playing Call of Cthulhu, and they sort of brought that skill set of burning things down to deal with it to this game. And it worked out. After the mansion heist, there is then the next part of trying to decipher the treasure they found, and they can either go to Shilba of the Eyeless Face, who is a very well-known character of the Fafnir Master stories, so this weird kind of wizard, potentially kind of god thing. It's really unclear who he is, or they can talk to somebody else, maybe a contact they have in the Pleasant Dark Delights, who tells them the whole history of the treasure they found. And the history is this old sect very long ago in Lankhmar that was doing very well until, they're doing too well, and Lankhmar is full of corruption. So the nobles do what they always do, which is, they get threatened by this little sect that's growing in popularity, so they ban it, murder a bunch of people, and then send the rest packing. But when the sect was driven out, they didn't have enough time to actually take their treasures with them, so while they ran away out of Lankhmar, their stuff stayed behind, which some people have been trying to find since, and this treasure sort of leads them to that. So after they talk to their contact, they'll learn that the temple does still exist, and they'll know its location, and they'll also learn that it's basically been taken over by squatters and just sort of all these tenements, and Lankhmar's already dangerous on the best of days, and they're going to a much worse part of town. Going through and dealing with a gang called the Spire Kings who will approach them once they're trying to find what the temple is, deal with the combat of that sort of thing, and then actually find the temple itself. And when they unlock it, they will find these masks of this sect. And those masks are going to come to life, and they're going to start fucking shit up. So the goal here is to basically stop these masks from fucking things up too much, and sort of, getting what they can from them. The masks are bejeweled, or bedazzled. Even if broken, they're still worth a decent chunk of coin, and maybe even more to the right buyer. And so that's generally the entire scenario. It's very straightforward. So to sort of give you how it went in my game, because we never actually got to the masks in my game, because this is a really, really mean module. The heist in the house itself is already dangerous as hell with the different things that are in there. You got like a leopards, you got like a fire trap, you have guards, and they have to get out of there. And then when you get to the tenements, there's a group called the Spider Kings, as I mentioned earlier, and they're rough. They got a drunk wizard, they have a bunch of little dudes, and those guys murdered my entire party. We basically TPK'd, except for the fact that the wizard was just able to get a high enough roll to kill them and make the rest scatter. 2 of the characters went down, the last guy stayed up, and it was an insane fight. It was really like, okay, you guys are pretty much screwed here. And so after that encounter, the wizard was drained, the other 2 just came back up. One was missing an arm. It was just a really rough encounter. They went, fuck this, we're just gonna sell all the stuff we know to the Thieves Guild, and they can deal with it. Even if my group had ended up being able to take on Spire Kings and didn't take as much of a loss as they did, they still have to deal with the masks after that. I think they made the right choice, just going, you know what, I think we're done. We can't do this. If we go any further, we're definitely dead. Everybody had an absolute blast. It is a really mean module, so I will say it might not be the worst thing to just have some extra PCs, or maybe have some backups ready. Maybe a few people in the tenements could be somebody who are a different adventuring band, or somebody around that might be able to just fill in a slot for the players if they lose them, if you're trying to do a campaign with this one. I think it will set a very good tone that players need to be smart, and that the world they're in is deadly. So in terms of criticism, I don't really have anything. Not to say it doesn't have, an issue here or there, but overall there's something that makes me think I need to make sure you guys know something before you buy this. Other than it being really mean, I think it's pretty good, and being mean is kind of part of these kinds of games. If you're playing DCC, you know what you're getting into. Your players should know what they're getting into. I would definitely make that a thing they understand, but I will say, just in terms of practicality, trying to start a campaign where everybody dies in the first session might kind of suck. Because with Lankhmar, you're supposed to only have like 1 character, usually 1 or 2. You're meant to have smaller groups than the regular DCC kind of group. So you might want to break that for this, because there's definitely going to be some death. But yeah, outside of that, highly recommend. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, so the next one we're covering is No Small Crimes in Lankhmar, and this is the first one I ever ran. It's a really good one, very simple, it's very small, no pun intended, but it's a very short one. I don't have very much to say about it, if I'm being honest. It's another meet like Masks of Lankhmar. The characters all meet up in a cul-de-sac outside of a house. They sort of go into this house. The security system basically shrinks them down, so you have a bit of like a Honey I Shrunk the Kids mixed with an Ocean's 11 kind of vibe going on with this one. This one gets a little bit more into that sort of zany DCC flavor to it than the other 2 I'm covering, because you get shrunk down, and they take advantage of that because you have to deal with like a big cat, like you can see here on the cover. You also have to deal with, little armed rats from Under Lankhmar. And Under Lankhmar is a whole other section of Lankhmar with its own little factions and little rat people and that sort of stuff. So if you want Under Lankhmar to be part of your campaign, this is a great place to start with it, to have them sort of introduced to these rats, and then fall down that line for more adventures of, them being small in Under Lankhmar if you want them to, or them dealing with the factions of Under Lankhmar. This one's a pretty classic dungeon crawl. You sort of just go through the house, you deal with a big cat, you deal with rats, you deal with a few traps here and there, you deal with a big automaton, and at the end of it, they finally grab their potions and get back to normal size, and that's the end of that one. So it's a very good one. This one easily a 1-shot. If you do this in a 2-shot, you can. Depends on how much the players are really having fun role-playing amongst each other and everything else. But if you're looking for just a quick game that you can do in probably 3 to 4 hours, this is a great one for it. So even though I don't really have much to say about the scenario, I think what makes it great is that it takes advantage of its premise. So you have to deal with a cat, which is basically like a horror movie villain, where you can have signs foreshadowing it before it actually shows up. And when it does show up, it is a real nasty creature. When you're like an inch or 2 inches tall, it is not a nice thing to deal with. So the final boss in this scenario is really well done. It has a massive automaton they have to deal with, as well as having the enlarging potions that they need to get back to normal size. So it's a fun sort of combat where they have to survive against this big thing and also decide and work together on who gets to get enlarged first, because it's going to take rounds and actions to do that. So as the fight goes on, they're going to try and help each other out, but there also might be that classic thing of them arguing as to who needs to go first. Who is the best to actually get back to normal size before the other ones do. And at the end of all these trials they go through, being tiny and dealing with all these sort of mundane encounters that have now become a serious threat when you're tiny, they get a pretty nice payout at the end of all this. So it's a really good one. I don't know if I'd recommend it over Masks of Lankhmar as a starting campaign one. I thought it was great for us. It did give the characters, an extra edge with some extra cash. It was really fun. They all had a blast. It's easily doable in a single session. It's also less to juggle. If you're a newer GM, or if you'd like a slower route into the whole urban adventuring thing, this whole scenario takes place in one house, so you don't really have to worry about too many outside factors. It's really just what's happening here. So yeah, highly recommend it. it, I will say, is a little bit of a quirky premise, and I think it's a fun start if you want to. But personally, I think if I was to do another Lankhmar campaign, like with new people, I would probably go with Masks over this one. But it is still a fantastic one. And don't forget that just because it's a meat, you can always use any of the snares whenever you want. You might need to bump things up or just want to change things. But this would be a fantastic adventure to do after Masks of Lankhmar if you want to have another little sort of low-level encounter with them. Not to mention, it's just a good sort of break if you're getting tired of faction stuff and you want to just throw this into the mix. It's like, okay, at least for a session, there's too many things going on with factions. I can't deal with all this. Here's just a scenario that takes place in a house, and I'll do that, and then I'll be able to get back to all the faction and intrigue we're doing, and it'll be a good break for that. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. So the last one we're covering today is Grave Matters, and this one is really awesome. It's a level 2 adventure. It's, again, with like these other two, it's a heist one. This one's really, really well done. I'm a big fan of it. The characters have a mysterious client asking them to go rob a embalming house that is actually a front for a smuggling ring. And so this client wants them to rob a sarcophagus that the smuggling ring has, and so they have to go to this embalming house, go through it, find where the sarcophagus is located, and then steal it and bring it back across the city. That's it. It's a very, very simple premise. So even though the premise is simple, there are complications because this embalming house is real. It's not just like a fake embalming house. There are actual employees there that have no idea it's part of a smuggling ring. So depending on when the players go in, whether it's during the daytime or nighttime, depends on what they're going to be dealing with. So this is a very grounded scenario except for two aspects. One is the sarcophagus itself, which contains the body of an old overlord of Lankhmar, almost like a mayor king is probably the best way to put it. The overlord has jewelry. So when the characters touch the jewelry, they get Geish to bring this body to the Temple of the Gods of Lankhmar, which is in a old district, very old temple, and that's sort of left ambiguous to sort of be an adventure seed for whatever you want to do next with that. Lead to some really crazy, creepy things, whatever it might be. Definitely sounds like a horror scenario, so that could be a really fun thing to do. So outside of that weird sarcophagus, the only other thing that's kind of weird, there's a ghoul that works for the smugglers as a guard, and the ghouls in Naewon, though they are weird and are different, they're actually pretty comparable to Fallout ghouls. They are sentient. They do eat flesh, which I don't know if the Fallout ghouls do or not. I know they like radiation stuff. I don't know if they actually eat flesh or not. But the ghouls in this do eat flesh. But they aren't just mindless zombies. They actually do have personalities and they are people. So there's a really good chance the players will encounter him. And if you want, depending on how you want to play him, you could open with Smooth Skin. And yeah, so this ghoul's pretty nasty. Bigger group size. He also has a guard dog with him. He's guarding a bunch of treasure. So if they do find him, he's in the attic. And then if they kill him or, send him packing because he doesn't necessarily want to die for the smugglers. He's just a mercenary. So if they can talk with him or kill him, they can get access to a lot of treasure that he's guarding. Outside those two weird supernatural elements, it's a pretty mundane kind of dungeon. So going back to the client, he works for the Thieves Guild, and so does the Smuggling Ring. They both work for them, so he doesn't really want too much disruption to happen, because he's kind of doing an underhanded thing here, trying to steal the sarcophagus for himself to do his own things with it. He doesn't want too much attention drawn to this, and he also doesn't want to disrupt business there, because they are making money for the Thieves Guild, which he benefits from. So he's going to ask the players to not kill too many people, or kill anybody at all, if they can help it, with a monetary reward as a bonus, if they can do that, and also going to be pretty fucking pissed at them if they don't listen to what he's saying. He's not really asking. He's kind of demanding it, and then also giving them a little bit of a carrot with a little extra monetary bonus for actually doing what he says. So with that little caveat added there, it makes it a little bit more of an interesting scenario, because the players can't just kick down the door and start slaughtering everybody they see and then getting through it. They have to be smart, they have to be sneaky, so when they actually get to the embalming house, they have to actually decide how they want to get into it. There's a few different ways in. There's the front door, there's windows on the second floor, there's a big sort of gate for where the death cart goes in. So they have a few different options, and these smugglers and employees are kind of peppered throughout the whole building. They have guards watching, so depending on how sneaky they are or how bad their rolls are, they'll know the players are coming. So you can lead to some really fun encounters. When I ran for my group, they kind of steamrolled in. They did really well. They had some good rolls. They were able to get in without being seen until they finally did get caught. And then they did some pretty fucked up stuff. They didn't kill them, but they hamstrung one of them. They bullied another into submission after both his companions were sort of knocked out, and they sort of just grabbed him and sent him packing. They said, you better get out of here. One player even took his clothes before he could leave, so he kind of just left sobbing and naked. It was comedic and disturbing, but it was certainly a way to deal with the thieves. I guess I guess I'll say that. So the building is really well laid out. I like it a lot because it's laid out like a real building would be for this sort of thing. You have the actual operations, you know, like where the big vats are for the bodies and chemicals. You have the death cart area. You have the front where, you know, they would deal with customers. You have upstairs with the administration, all that sort of stuff. So it has all the elements that you would want for this. The reason why I like that is that even if you didn't want this scenario, if you didn't want the sarcophagus being stolen, or you just want a base for a faction, grab this. Like, this is a really good one to grab. You have a whole building. You already have some stats out there for some of the characters. I think it's a really well done headquarters for a faction that you might want in your own game. Whether it's Lankhmar or whatever else, I think it's just a good one to grab. I could see myself reusing the building in this one for that alone. There's a lot of fun stuff there, so highly recommend for that. The boss of the scenario is pretty rough. He's this ex-military guy. He's got a few tricks up his sleeves. He's pretty fun. He can try and negotiate with the group, or, you know, he'll probably just go into kill mode if they, you know, decide that they're just going to try and get rid of him and, you know, go for robbing the whole place. He's not going to stand for that. My group just put him to sleep, and they went down to the cellar and they stole the sarcophagus, which is basically in this old sort of crematorium part. There's a bunch of traps there, like a classic fire trap. So because it was a one-shot, I sort of had to be an epilogue. Once they grabbed the sarcophagus and went through the sewers, that was kind of the end of the scenario. But what you can do is that this is a great time to sort of inject a rebel party or a new faction where, you know, when they're getting it across the city, either through the streets or through the sewers, you know, maybe they get a little bit of complication here. So if you're on a campaign, this can be a good way to sort of add that person there now to sort of make them a problem or a rival. But yeah, I highly recommend Grave Matters. There is a secondary scenario in this book. It's another meet. I didn't run it, so I didn't want to cover it because I don't know if it's good or not, though it is also run by Michael Curtis, who just makes great stuff. He wrote this one. Actually, I think he wrote... Oh, yeah. Oh, geez. I just realized. He wrote all three of these. So Michael Curtis makes awesome stuff. Good job, Michael. But yeah, so that's Grave Matters, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know this is pretty broad strokes. I didn't go too deep on details. But that's because I just sort of recommend all of them. I haven't really seen many scenarios like them out there that are just fun and easy to run for urban games. But my favorite scenario, for example, of all DCC stuff, Lankhmar and everything else, is acting up in Lankhmar. And that's gonna get its own video. That might be like a milestone video, you know, for like 1,000 subs or something like that, because that one's awesome. I really do love that one a lot. And that one I have a lot to say about. But these ones are just really solid ones to plug into your campaign or for one-shots. If you just want really good thief games, if you want really high-octane kind of heists, I think these are great. Because I often see a lot of people are looking for really good heist ones, and I feel like all three of these really work if you're just looking for a heist game. I mean, who doesn't want to play thieves stealing shit from people? It's awesome. I will say this, it's way more fun to steal treasure from a bunch of rich assholes than it is to steal treasure from a bunch of dead dudes in a tomb from 1,000 years ago. They both have their place, and they're both really fun, but I gotta say, this one takes the cake for me. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time. Play smart, play risky, and stay safe out there.